Farmland tenant-landlord relationships can sometimes get complicated, especially when a written lease isn't used. Market Journal's Kurtis reports on the legal rights of landlords and tenants.
Many leases in Nebraska are handshake deals. These agreements are often unwritten because landlords are dealing with family, friends, and neighbors. The thought of a written agreement may give the perception of a lack of trust between these individuals, according to University of Nebraska-Lincoln Extension Ag Law Specialist Dave Aiken.
People think that if I want a written lease, that means that I don't trust you to do the right thing, when a problem comes up. But sometimes when there's a lot of money on the line, that's an awful lot of temptation, and it makes it harder for a lot of people to do the right thing. So having it in writing, just everybody knows what the deal is going in, and that makes it a lot more clear cut.
Aiken says in the absence of a written agreement, a tenant can remove improvements if they are easily removable. However, if improvements are permanently attached, they belong to the landlord.
And that's when it's the most unfair to the tenant, because say the tenant pays for a building that's anchored, or that's set in concrete with footings and stuff like that. The tenant can't pull that out without digging up the land and stuff like that. So that ends up belonging to the landlord, even though the tenant paid for it.
Unwritten leases can also negatively affect landowners, especially when terminating leases.
The major disadvantage for landlords is say that it's a handshake deal, and you're after the September 1st deadline for terminating the lease, and you sell the land. Well, the buyer gets the tenant, even though the buyer may have thought that that they were going to farm it themselves. If the landlord hasn't given notice of termination by September 1st, then the lease is automatically renewed for the next year, and even say I sell the land in December, doesn't matter. It's still, the tenant still has the lease for that next year.
Written agreements make it easier for landlords to set lease termination parameters. Aiken recommends tenants taking the time to visit with an attorney before entering leasing agreements. By laying out the agreements in writing in advance, both the landlords and tenants can be better protected. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Kurtis Harms.
Thanks, Kurtis. Aiken says in Iowa, all farm leases, whether in writing or through a handshake, allow tenants 6 months' notice of lease termination. However, Nebraska doesn't have these rules and allows any date of lease termination in written agreements and 6 months' notice in handshake deals.